And now I would like to invite for this stand Marian Zablotsky. He is an economist, co-founder of Few of Laws, and maybe regret him.
Мені щойно сказали, що треба говорити англійською. Так. Okay, so thank you very much for coming to this conference. A few short words about me and what kind of activities do we currently do with Parliament and with our partner organizations. So my name is Marian Zablotsky. I was elected as part of the President's Party a couple of weeks ago. And actually my place in the Parliament is due to the common projects that we have been doing together with liberty-minded organizations. They may be not well known in Ukraine, but it turns out that there is, as I found out for myself, that there is a huge community abroad in US, in Europe, of non-governmental organizations that focus specifically on promoting freedom. Ukraine joined this club along with several NGOs only back in 2015. Bendukidze Free Market Center was the first one, and then later Ukrainian Economic Freedoms Foundation, which I recently chaired, later joined. So then came Ukrainian Students for Freedom, and both founders are also here one of the fastest growing organizations. And since the President's Party declared that they have a libertarian ideology, they proposed me a place on their party ticket to promote libertarian ideas. And currently we are working on implementing those things. And we are talking like really hardcore libertarianism. I cannot say that this will be the initiatives that I will definitely promote, but what I can tell you that even if you Google previously, I worked hard on canceling the agricultural land sale ban, the moratorium, for the last couple of years. And you recently heard that the President said that enough is enough. We have to put legislation into Parliament that will allow agricultural land to be traded by end of September. And our current plans are to adopt the legislation in October. I will talk later about that. But also, if you Google me, you will find out that I was one of the co-authors of the bill in the last Parliament to legalize medical cannabis in Ukraine during the last session. We also heavily promoted legalizing intimate services. So currently we have a huge agenda up till year end to promote freedom. Why do we focus on that, and why it is the key driving force for me and for our party? First, you can never go wrong with freedom. It's very, very simple. No one will ever suffer from the fact that you just give more opportunities. If you want, you use them. If you don't, you don't. So if you just allow the land to be traded, there are no losers. Those who want will buy it. Those who won't, those who don't, just won't. And it's very simple. Secondly, freedom is by far the best tool to fight corruption. It's really, really simple. If there is a permit to conduct some type of economical activities, there's always a risk. And in Ukraine, a 99% risk that it will be associated with corruption. Get rid of the permit, no problem. And we have done this in the past. Over the last several years, our organization has been successfully promoting legislation that got rid of over 30 permit documents. And now we are in this phase where we understand we have a very, very short period when we have trust from you to do something good. And our key focus is freedom. So by year end, we intend to do the most difficult, the most contentious issues that are in Ukraine. Canceling the land sale ban, legalizing gambling, and maybe even going a bit further than that. As for the land reform, really get prepared. I can tell you even now that this will be a completely open market, because there have been tons of discussions by canceling the land sale ban gently, gradually. This is not what we intend to do. Yes, there will be some delayed period, but basically it will be a free-for-all. You will be free to buy and sell land very easily. And what we have noticed is recently, you know that maybe some of those issues are unpopular. Maybe you have heard that over the last 10 years or more, more than 70% of people were actually against lifting of the land sale ban. But since the president came into power and he insisted on this issue, the public opinion turned. According to the recent poll, 51% of Ukrainians actually support lifting of the ban and only 38% are against. This just shows that if you are really insistent into promoting freedom, people will trust you and you will have a good chance of achieving that. So my prediction is by year end, you will see 6,700,000 people who own these land plots, who own agricultural land, they will be able to sell them. This will immediately give them access to, on average, 100 to 200,000 hryvnias of easily accessible money if they do decide to sell. And this will be a huge boost for our economy. Also recently, I've been working, as I told you, on other issues. For example, legalizing medical cannabis. In my opinion, it's also a very important subject for Ukraine. You know that we earn only about $500 from our land per hectare. But if you produce things that are have more added value, which are more intensive, but which are currently forbidden, we can earn much more money. And truly, this has been this type of product, agricultural product, has been in our history for a very long time. You know, even in our football team, who is one of the key players? Konoplyanka. That has been in our DNA for a very long time, and it has been in our culture. And we have a very good climate for those things, and I believe that by liberalizing things, we can bring new boost for economy. As far as gambling goes, this is also a subject that we have been working on very roughly. You know that since 2009, gambling, any organization of gambling is forbidden in Ukraine. But you can see that all around Ukraine there are 7,000 plus kiosks where you can gamble, sort of. It's sort of legal because they call it a lottery. Of course, it's not a lottery. And since it's protected by basically Ministry of Interior, our police, actually the tax burden that they put those gambling spots is much higher than the state would regularly tax them. Do you know that the average losing rate in those smallish casinos is around 30% for our poor people who play there? If you just go to online casinos, it's just 6%. This is all because of the heavy burden of informal taxation on those things. And we intend to legalize gambling as one of the first steps. And in my opinion, medical cannabis can be one of the next. We will see how it goes, but I can assure you a couple of things. By year end, we will strive to free economy as much as possible. We often say that we are the poorest country in Europe, but according to all ratings, we are also the least economically free country in Europe. Yes, we have political freedom, but we do not have economical freedom. We cannot earn money in all sorts of ways that is allowed in Western Europe, and that's why we are poor. And it's the simplest, most powerful recipe for success. Yes, we can beg for more money from state, we can inject state funds, but the best and the simplest thing that we can do is just to allow bigger possibilities to earn money. And this will be our focus till year end. I hope with this short speech I can finish my talk, and if you have any further questions, I'll be happy to answer.
My name is Nick, I'm Ukrainian. Basically, I want to go straight forward. I'm in total opposition to servant of people and Zelensky and his power. And at the same time, I have a question. You told me that your party has the libertarian agenda, libertarian program, but this is completely not true. Zelensky's program, for both presidency and his party for the parliament, has almost 50-50 on both liberal, I mean like free economy and state regulation. So please, can you please explain this point? Because I think it is important to not confuse people. Thank you.
Can you please tell us which things are not libertarian in the program?
I mean that in total points, like in total program, the positions are 50-50 pro-state regulation to involve more voters who are entities, who state for government support, the so-called budgetniki and stuff. And the second one is for modern, for liberal, to involve more young voters. It's not my point, it's point that was presented by the Chesnum NGO, which actually analyzes all the political agenda, political programs prior to this election. So what you are saying that your party has a libertarian agenda is not entirely true. And the second point is that I remember in Zelensky's program, Zelensky is guaranteed any piece of land to any Ukrainian citizen, which is also not very libertarian because he's just gonna do something like redistribution in a very socialist style. Could you please explain this point to people? Thank you.
Okay, well, let's just simply agree to disagree. I know the program back and forth, and all the legislation I'm working on is definitely libertarian. And
they are working on, but not the entirely, because But that's basically the point. You're not very much familiar with your own program and positions. That's something that journalists blame you of, and you blame journalists for that.
Well, I can give you one thing. Some of the things that have been submitted are not very libertarian, especially in tax issues. And as a member of Parliament's tax committee, I'm working very hard on those issues to reverse them. But they are part of internal discussion, which I cannot speak about right now. Thank you.
And by the way, I support gambling and all the things that you promote in this speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for attending, and I'm very excited about what is happening here in Ukraine these days. You just engaged the libertarian debate, who is bigger socialist, but I believe it's this joke, internal joke, but I believe it's great what you're doing here, and I'm really wondering, I'm trying to understand really, what do you think were the main causes of such a big success for this government? I know there was this movie, but if you can elaborate a little bit more about the social background, how such a big switch in the Ukrainian society could have been made, because it's inspirational, and of course you're probably the most successful kind of libertarian-oriented government now on the European continent, as far as I can see, and at least in the terms of the amount of changes actually being implemented these days.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question, and thank you for coming. We actually know each other from many other forums, although, and actually, I remember you presenting Liberland at Americans for Tax Reform in Washington, D.C. Great presentation, as always. And plus, before I answer a question, in May 2020, finally, the Europe Liberty Forum will come to Kyiv. Previously, it was in London, Budapest, Athens, and other cities, but together with the Economic and Freedom Foundation, we finally won a tender to host one in Kyiv. To answer your question, reason for success, I think it's not something that can be explained directly, but I think over 28 years, there's something that people understand subconsciously, whether the person is sincere or not. So you may be saying the right words, even the best words, the right ideology, but people after 28 years, they sense fakeness. I can tell you definitely, because we have a lot of internal discussions, and although much is leaked to the press, some of the key things were never leaked to the press. And from those key things, I can tell you definitely, the president really does not take bribes, and he really does not allow his closest circle to do that. That's like honestly. And the amount of the security service of Ukraine, SBU, was very convincing with members of parliament towards not taking any bribes. And plus, it's not only about the media. You know, there's one theory which I believe that you always can get to the other person, no matter where in the world, through no more than 7 people, right? So if there is a rumor that there is corruption in one agency, very quickly it fills out the knowledge of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And plus the second key to success, I think, was relative humbleness. So, you know, people in searching for the protest vote, they were trying to choose someone who has the least advertising. It is true, the Zelensky team at least for the presidential elections, had the least advertising by far of all the candidates. And it was sort of a protest vote, in my opinion. But this is my opinion, because I think of all the people who elected Zelensky and then later his team had their own personal reasons.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Josh Friedman. I actually am a member of the press, not the local press, though. And I know we're focused on domestic reforms, and I really appreciate listening to that discussion. But I'm just curious, with some of the rhetoric I've heard, particularly this week, coming from the president, I thought maybe you could address some of the issues relating to Russia, because I find it very interesting that on the one hand, the president is very firm in his stance that he's going to get back the territories, but on the other hand, he's firm in the promise to bring back, or to end the war. And I would appreciate if you could address what the president and the party's strategy is on accomplishing these two different matters.
I honestly can't, for a simple reason. I am focused on economical and tax policy and not foreign relations. You know, we have this new thing in our new team. We do not talk on things that we are really not an expert on. We are never shy away in being told, I don't know. No, often on talk shows I'm being asked about medical reforms, and the general tradition is that every member of parliament of all the opposition parties always talks about anything they're being asked. My answer is always, I don't know, I don't work on it. It's very hard for me to understand what actually goes on there. As far as the foreign policy issues, I don't know. They've been handled by President personally and by his closest advisor, Andriy Yermak. I know them personally, and I can tell you from internal discussions they are very patriotic. And I'm definitely sure that they will never sell any of Ukraine's foreign interests.
Thank you.
I would like to ask regarding the taxation policy. You mentioned that it's your field of activity. If the government and the president, they have libertarian views on the world, what about the taxation? Because the libertarian approach is no taxation at all. So I heard different opinions about taxation policy, maybe a little bit to reduce it, maybe to tax just dividends or whatever. But what is actually libertarian here? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very painful subject, and until the internal discussion is finished, I cannot address too many details. But what I can tell you, the current proposals have been mainly drafted by Ministry of Finance and State Fiscal Administration. I am trying to make at least some of them more libertarian. That's all I can say for now. But there are other things, you know. Yesterday we had a discussion with our biggest three biggest and only three iron ore mining companies, and they brought us different figures towards how much tax they are paying on natural resources. Basically, they made a mistake of being overly transparent and showing us their actual figures. So they try to show us how so many taxes they are paying. So they showed us, look, it's not only payment on natural resources, but it's corporate profit tax and salary tax. But from them, for example, for Metinvest, a very simple calculation. The official net profit of iron ore business of Metinvest is 29 billion hryvnias. Do you know what tax do they pay on iron ore? 1.5 billion. So their tax rate is 5%, is from natural resource is left to the state, 95% is left as their corporate profit. So to give you a rough idea, the total net profit of all iron ore mining companies is around $1.8 billion per year. They pay to the state budget as rent $80 million. You know why this happened? Because over the years, some large companies who have very large concentration of tax have been paying bribes to highest government officials in order not to tax them. What that leads to is Ministry of Finance and all the other agencies trying to find alternative resources, those that cannot generate that amount of bribes. And it typically ends up falling on small and medium-sized business. What I will be trying to do is to make taxation actually fair. I know that higher taxes are not philosophically correct for libertarianism, but paying 5%, but paying $80 million of $1.8 billion net profit is way too libertarian even for me. Right? So we will try to make those taxation fairer and to make taxes on small and medium-sized businesses lower.
Well, give another big round of applause for Marian. Thank you very much. Yes.